All right, what's up, boys? What's up, lads? All right, doing a video about how to understand draft better. Now, sort of doing this video because you guys want to see some analytical content on the YouTube. That's what you guys said on Twitter. So, not gonna do the top plays and fails. I'm just gonna do this instead, and other videos similar. And I was sort of inspired to do this video based on one of the drafts that happened at Worlds recently. Um, and it was because they blind picked champions mid, casted in vain, that are pretty illegal. And it actually isn't like it's not really that crazy to me because I like have a good understanding, but to like a more lay person, it might be like how is it even possible to do that? Or maybe you're like, I don't even know why that's bad. What's wrong with that? So I just want to give like a more like, get everyone more on the same playing field in terms of understanding draft because there's a lot of comments like made by like people in the community, and it's not always like super like constructive the way that they phrase their comments. So I wanted to kind of help people out. So you guys can ignore the gameplay. I didn't really know what to put on the screen, so I just put a gameplay there. So that's just how it is sometimes. And again, I'm gonna be probably simplifying a lot of the stuff I'm talking about. So if I say something like this is what's going to happen, I usually just mean usually that happens in the most cases, but sometimes it doesn't. And I am aware of that, but again, I'm just simplifying. So let's head into it. Draft is not isolated from the team. So what I mean by that is one team's good draft is not the same as another team's good draft. And it really depends on the players on the team that's going to dictate whether a draft is good or bad in their own opinion. And that's what's most important because it is possible to have both teams think that they have a bad draft and the same way that can be good draft. So the reason that that's important is essentially it comes down to consistent success. And success is something that you have to be very careful with. You don't want to come out of a draft thinking, okay, if we win, it's good. If we lose, it's bad. That's not what people do. That's not what teams do. But what teams do is they take a look at how consistent that strategy or that draft works for them. And especially on stage games are valued very highly, where if you consistently lose with a draft in practice and on stage, there is going to be a point where you just don't pick it on stage, even if it's a good situation for it, because you just consistently lose with it, and it's just unlikely you're going to win, right? Even if the problem isn't necessarily that you're playing the strategy poorly or you don't know how to deal with it properly, if you're losing every game, it's probably a good idea to just not do it. And similarly, it's the same if you're winning everything. If you keep winning with the draft, even if you think it's not that good, if teams just like keep losing to it, like you can just keep playing it until someone beats it, right? Um, and I understand that that's not the most future-proofing way of thinking about the draft, but it's more just to show that you try to be practical. You're not a robot, right? It's not just you do whatever's the best possible in every situation, right? Difficulty and comfort and practicality are all very important concepts in draft, and trying to play the easiest comp is really important. The same way that trying to play the most comfortable comp is important, the most comfort champs, the most comfort strategy, and all of that stuff is very, very important. Um, and there's a ton of things I could talk about just talking about uh, that kind of thing, but I'm gonna more focus on actual draft stuff. But before we get into that, again, a billion things to go over. Um, there are concepts about the game that you have to understand and appreciate to fully understand drafting or a specific team's drafting. So, what I mean by concepts that sort of like transcend draft is things that happen like every game or like a lot of the games or multiple times in a game that teams can have different opinions on, right? I'm not talking about opinions like CS is good. I'm talking about opinions like how important are herald swaps, right? Should you herald swap at all? Should you not herald swap? Now, the extremes of that specific one are like don't do it ever or do it all the time. And teams can have different opinions. It's going to be somewhere in between that, right? And draft is going to be affected by how strongly you feel about that, right? If you feel like it's very, very important that you herald swap, you might pick like a global, like a champ like GP that has a global wave clear ability, so that when your bot lane does go to top to get the herald, then you can just instant wave clear bot lane wave and not lose as much. Similarly, if you think that you don't prioritize it that much, you can pick a champion that kills turrets fast, and when the enemy bot lane goes to top side to take the herald, you can kill the turret quickly and get a lot of plates and get a lot of gold, right? That can be how those things affect the draft. But not only do these things affect the draft, but also the way they interact with each other and an individual team's um, comparison between different concepts is going to affect the draft as well. So a team might prioritize Herald very highly, but they also might prioritize dragon stacking really highly. And if they prioritize dragon stacking really highly, that might mean that they pick a top laner that doesn't have a global champion, a global wave clear ability, but actually can like go to bot lane and get bot lane ahead so that they can get dragon, right? Um, that can be like why these concepts are really important. And unless you're really on the team, it's not going to be possible to like know everything that they think about and every like nuance in every situation that these things exist. So that's why it's like very hard to like guess what a team's draft is going to be, and even harder to guess why they don't do something, because there's a lot of reasons you could not do something. And that's why like it's very like kind of ignorant in my opinion when people when people give like comments that are like very oversimplified and like get really upset about it, because it really is very, very complicated. And without sort of having these like very nuanced understanding um, of the individual teams like preferences or like opinions about the game, then it's not like very constructive to just give like random opinions based on certain things. So not really the point I was trying to make, or not like super relevant to the talk about draft, but that is something that's very important about draft. And more talking about actual draft strategy now that we're actually talking about the draft. Um, you ban stuff you don't want to play versus generally. I'll go into more detail later, but I will more want to talk about the picks right now, and that is there's generally two strategies in terms of picks. Usually, your first three picks are either going to be your identity, what your team comp does, and the core parts of your team comp, or they're going to be very flexible and they can do anything. Um, and that sort of matches with the second part being um, rounding out the comp if you've already picked your identity, or deciding what your comp's going to be if you pick the flexible champs. Those are generally the two ways. So um, that that is generally the two styles. And the reason that I mentioned that is that's going to give like it make it easier to like predict what's going to happen next if you can kind of identify what it looks like the opponent's doing, right? Especially if you're watching, if you see like a very polarizing champ that only has one play style, you can like be like, oh, now I know what they're going to do. They're going to try and do things that synergize with it, or like what bans they want to do to help protect that. So that's why I wanted to mention that. Another thing about general draft strategy is just that blind picks usually lose and are bad, and counter picks usually win and are good. That's usually how it works. Um, there are exceptions, obviously. There are some champions that are good blind pick, and generally those are going to be like flex picks or just really strong champs. So it's not always going to be true that blind picks are bad, but that's generally the case. Um, and also there are some champions that are counter pick only, and that's why you wouldn't see them as much. Um, so an example of this would be like Kassadin, and the reason that he's counter pick only is because he can get countered in lane so hard by certain AD champs that it puts your team at such a disadvantage in a competitive setting to pick that champ that it's just not worth playing blind pick. And that's why it's kind of confusing when people do that, because sometimes you can have like that level of understanding that a champion like Caston's only counter pick, but not know when that isn't always the case, right? And everything is dependent in League. Everything's not 100% true all the time. So that's why this stuff's very complicated, but that's generally the case. And outside of specific picks, let's talk about sides. Blue versus red side. Blue side generally gets the advantage in the fact that they get the first pick. That's like basically their entire advantage in draft. If blue side is the side that people prefer, it is almost always because of first pick. Because that's like virtually the only advantage they get in the whole draft. And because they get first pick, it kind of forces the enemy team to ban out really strong champs, or ban out any champions that are contested between the two teams, or ban out like any comfort champions that you don't want the opponent to get because they just have first pick. They get the first pick of the champ pool. So that's like the biggest advantage that blue side gets. The other advantage they get is they get the last ban on the 4-5 phase, which is kind of hard to explain why it's an advantage, but it just is an advantage, and I'm not really going to go into it because it's really complicated to explain why. So, red side's advantages, they really get their big advantage off of counter picks. They get a lot more counter picks. They because they choose second basically, and they also get the last pick on the first phase and the second phase. So they get essentially 2 counter picks, or they get a blind pick on the first phase that they can protect with bans. And that gives them a lot of counter picks. So red side's big advantage is definitely counter picks. Again, they also get the last ban in the first phase, but I'm not going to go into it. So with that being said, general draft stuff out of the way, let's talk about more concrete, actual draft stuff to talk about. So first thing that happens in the draft is the ban phase. So what are the different types of bans? Why would you ban certain things? What if you see a ban? What is that telling you about the strategy of the team? Well, I thought about it and I came to the conclusion that there's probably about 5 different types of bans. And the first type, some of them are easier to understand than others. The first type is just champion strength based bans. And that's just banning OP champs, right? Champions that are just too strong on the current patch and are not worth leaving up because you'd have to bend over backwards to contain that champion, and it's only worth 1 ban, right? It's not going to be that big of a hurdle to go over. Second type of ban are target bans. These are bans directed at one player specifically, and they can be either to get them off of comfort or because they're just really good at that champ. Good example is like Bjergsen Zillion, right? He was like smurfing in LCS this year, and now everyone doesn't want to play it. Now no one's gonna let that happen again, pretty much, probably. So we'll see if he gets banned, gets respect banned at Worlds. I would not be surprised if it did, but anyways, that's not the point. The other type is comfort ban, where you're just banning something that they're very comfortable on. They might not play a lot of champs, and if they don't play a lot of champs, you can just ban the champ they most play, and then they're going to be uncomfortable. And like I was saying earlier, comfort's really important in draft because you want to make your players comfortable, essentially. The third type is protect bans. Now, essentially what this is you want to ban your champion's counter matchups. And this happens more like later in the draft because you actually need to have champs to ban for. But essentially this is just to like help alleviate the potential downside of your blind pick. And this is very common. This is probably the most common ban on 4-5. Almost always this happens, but It's not the only type. And the last two are more complicated. Well, not the fourth one. The fourth one's composition bans, which is just a ban you do for the composition that you're playing with or against, right? You can ban, or sorry, playing against. You can ban a champion that helps their team identity a lot or counters yours directly, right? And this is again mainly on 4-5 because you don't have your champs locked in. You don't know what your comp is. So this is another type of ban. It's different from like a lane ban, specifically for a lane. It would be more for like later in the game, composition wise. Um, and the fifth type of ban is kind of more complicated. It's more about I called it a draft ban, but I don't really have a name for it. Um, it's mainly talking about like flex picks or just any pick that makes it hard to draft versus. So this would be stuff like like TF or like Rengar or like Eve, where it's like they like warp the game a lot and it's just like annoying to play versus and like kind of like gets rid of a lot of champions you would otherwise want to be able to play. Or it's like a flex pick where it can just go in so many different roles that's like you have to blind pick a lot more champs, which isn't very good. So sometimes it is worth to just ban these champs because you don't want to have to deal with the issues that they come up that they force you to deal with later in the draft. And a good example of a champion that works like that right now is like Set, right? Set can go top, jungle, mid, and support, right? Like so if someone first picks Set, it's like okay, I don't know where that's going. It's going somewhere. So I can't really counterpick it. I could counterpick it in 4 roles, but then like 3 of my roles are gonna get counterpicked, so it's not worth, right? So those are the general types of bans, and this kind of leads into what I was saying earlier about like different teams have different opinions on one concept, and that's going to impact what types of bans you're going to see one team more likely do. So, for example, one team might really prioritize counterpicking their enemy champions, and if they do that, you're going to see probably more likely protect bans rather than like comp bans or even draft bans because they're very counterpick focused. So they're just going to be counterpicking whatever they see, right? And that's going to make it less likely that they're going to do these other types of bans. And moving on to the picks, because picks are the next. Um, honestly, it's actually quite difficult to sort of concisely explain pick strategies because there's like a billion ways of doing it, and I like it would take so long to like give every possible way, but I'm gonna try my best. I narrowed it down to like the few general best, most like consistently strong ways of drafting for each of the phases. So we'll start with blue side. Like I said, first pick is the most important pick for blue side. You must have a good first pick or a power pick. It doesn't have to be like it has to be power pick. It has to be something that's like, yes, we got this. This is what we think about. Like this is really really important to the draft. That we got this. So that can be that it's OP. It doesn't have to be though. It could also be because it's like a flex pick or really flexible. It can go into a lot of styles, or it could be like a really strong comfort. Like one of your players is just like so comfortable on a champ and so skilled that you're just like, yeah, just pick it and they're gonna carry. Um, or it could be like a contested pick where both teams prioritize a champion that's not quite OP that you'd first pick it in another series, but against this specific team, you're gonna first pick it because you guys both like that champ. So that's like the most important thing for blue side. 2-3 is sort of where it gets a lot more complicated because it really depends on not only your first pick but also the red side's 1-2. But I'm gonna try and do my best. Um, for any, this goes for both red side too. For any phase of the draft where a team picks one or two champions together, you're always going to be able to pick a combo. And what I mean by combo is just two champions that synergize really well with each other, not only with their abilities, but also compositionally. So right now, that's like Shen Hecarim, where they have like really good skirmishing and really good dive together, and they're both good picks right now, and they both like synergize really well together. So that would be what I consider a combo. Another combo would be like Zyrakan, where they're intended to be played together. So whenever you have like two picks to pick together, you can always pick a combo. So just know that that's always true. I'm not going to mention it um, every single time. So we'll just keep going. Um, so 2-3 on blue side. Um, I split this up into three things. So if first pick was mid, top, or a jungle champ, or a flex between those roles, um, it is possible for the 2-3 you could get all of those. And the reason for that is because leaving your bot lane for 4-5 allows you a lot more combos for your bot lane to pick than just having one of your bot lane picked and having to match that later in the draft. Because not only is that is like the best match with your champion gonna be banned because they have bans. Um, Also because there's a lot of bot lane champions that work well with only one other champ, and they might not be good to pick by themselves, but if you pick both of them together, then they are good. So having your bot lane have that flexibility later in the draft makes it like in certain metas like virtually guaranteed that you're gonna get like a fine bot lane. So that's one strategy depending if your first pick was mid top or jungle. Similarly, for basically the exact same reason, if you first pick AD or support, then you could just pick your other one and then pick like a counter pick to whatever they want to. Or just 1-2, or just 2-3 AD support. That's also possible. So for basically the exact same reason that it's just good to do that. And otherwise, if you don't do one of those two things, if you're not like doing that for like composite, for like the combo reasons for bot lane, you could also do the most common, most normal thing that happens on 2-3 is one of the picks is going to be a counter to whatever they picked on red side, and the other pick is going to be a blind pick. That's almost always how it works, um, just based on what red side usually does. So I'll go into red side after this. 4-5 for blue side. It's honestly the same. Usually it's going to be a counter or a blind pick, but there's actually an extra uh, possibility here because you know so much about the draft that now you can start picking like compositionally like counter opponents. So you can see what the opponent has, especially on blue side. You're going to have 4 picks to see, not just 3. Um, you can pick like a composition, or you can pick a champion that like works really well against the enemy comp, or like sort of negates what the enemy tries to do, or like enhances what you try to do. That's like more likely on 4-5 than on 2-3, and that would be like the general blue side picks in each phase what they're gonna try to do. Red side is different. Red side's honestly a lot more complicated. 1-2, there's generally 3 ways. Again, one combo, but mainly um, trading OP champ, a traded power pick, basically, not an OP champ, just a traded power pick, and an answer to the opponent's power pick, or just an answer to the opponent's power pick and just a blind. That's like usually how 1-2 works. That's not that complicated. 3 pick is also like not super difficult. It's either gonna be a counter pick, or it's gonna be one of those unsafe blind picks with protect bans. That's almost always how third pick works. Pretty much never is it anything else. So that's what you're gonna be looking for to see. Again, red side's a lot about counter pick, so that's why it is like that. Now, fourth pick for red side is honestly the most Like, there's so many options here because it really, really depends on like what the previous picks were. Because it's not always that you have the same roles picked on 1, 2, 3, and sometimes you do, and sometimes, and like depending on what you banned, it's gonna change what you're picking here. So, I'm trying my best. Generally, the options are you can pick a blind pick champion that you like protect band preemptively. Um, Now again, this is like kind of give you some insight into why the last bans are kind of nice, is because if you preempt bans, protect ban something, they could ban it last, so then you kind of waste bans. So you have to be sort of smart about how you do it, but that is one option. Um, it could also just be a straight counter pick if you guys pick different stuff in the 1, 2, 3. It could also be a contested champ, so if you guys both have the same role to pick, and there's a really strong champ, you could just take that one away. Or you could pick again, like a compositionally countering or negating thing to sort of counter your opponents. The fifth pick, counter pick, is generally going to be just a counter pick, straight counter pick. The last pick counter pick is the most powerful counter pick because you get to see every single champ in the whole draft, and a lot of the time, champions get countered by a style of champ rather than a specific type of champ, and the best champions to counter a certain champion are just the best champions that are good against a lot of comps. But if you see every champ on the enemy team, you have a lot more freedom in picking literally whatever champ is best against every aspect of the enemy comp. So, sort of to give an example of what I mean, um, let's say that the enemy team has like low range, and the enemy mid lane is something like, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't think about this before, but I'm thinking something that loses to Swain. But like Swain is not something that you can play in a lot of games, but Swain can be played into like Galio, for example. But if an enemy team picks Galio early, it wouldn't really be smart to pick Swain because Swain gets countered by a lot of things in terms of like composition. But if they like have a lot of things that aren't good into Swain, like Swain suddenly is just really strong, and that's why fifth pick counter pick is so powerful, and that's going to be like the most um, important thing for red side draft is usually that fifth and that third pick, um, because there's like the last picks of the area. But I mean, with that being said, I'm pretty much done. I pretty much have everything that I wanted to talk about. Um, I hope you guys learned something from this. Um, the game's almost over, so I'll just play out the rest of the game. Um, Again, the game was not really important. It was just some game I played today. But I hope you guys liked this content. If you did, make sure to let me know in the comments or on my Discord. I'll have the link to my Discord in the description. Um, I do coaching streams every week. I'm doing one today, Thursday, the 1st of October. I don't know if I'm actually going to upload this today, but I'm doing one today at around probably like 8:30 p.m. EST. I've also got Twitter, just going full sellout mode. I've also got a Twitter that you guys should follow. Have that link to that. And I really want your feedback because I'm gonna try and like upload more of these videos. I know you guys want more analytical videos, and I need like ideas on what to talk about, on what analysis you guys want, and what analysis you guys feel like would be helpful to you. I also want to know if this was helpful to you guys, so please let me know in the comments below. And I hope you guys enjoy this video. Make sure to like and subscribe. It would really help me out. Make sure to tune in to my Twitch streams because I really enjoy it. And I'm always down to answer questions. You guys can just ask me on Discord or on Twitter message, whatever you guys want. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in my next stream. Peace out, boys.